He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Welcome to No Stupid Questions. We're back for another week getting answers to all your money questions. I'm joined by Justin Gregory.
How you doing?
Thank you for being here.
Oh, grateful. And to start off, we've got a question here from Serena in Auckland, who wants to know all about private schools.
Hi, this is Serena. Here is a hopefully not too stupid question. Do you think private school is worth it, or am I better off investing the equivalent school fee in a managed fund for 13 years and handing control of that fund over to my daughter by the time she finishes school, provided that she has grown into a young lady who can be trusted with that kind of responsibility?
This is such a tricky question. I think parents all want what's best for their kids, right? And you can absolutely tie yourself into knots trying to decide what the best school is to send your child to. Did you go to private school?
No. I went to a state-integrated Catholic college in the South Island. My partner went to a private school, though. She's all for them.
Okay. I didn't either. I went to Westlake Girls. But being careful not to sound very privileged, I am about to send my son to one because I'm concerned about finding the right fit for him. And also, I live in a part of the country now where private school maybe isn't as expensive as they are in Auckland. But also, I really believe in supporting local schools. So it's been a tortured year for me trying to work out what to do here.
I'm sorry to hear about your torture there, Susan, over private schools. But the basic question here is it worth the money, right? Do kids do better at private schools, or are you basically better off investing the money in their future?
Yeah, it can certainly be a lot of money. If you took the $30,000, say, that you might spend on private school fees conservatively in Auckland, and you assume that your child goes from year 7 until year 13, if you put that money into an investment that gave you 6% a year instead, you could have almost $300,000 by the time they finish school, which is not an insignificant amount of money. And some OECD research does show a private school advantage in New Zealand, though. But that same OECD research shows that students in public schools in a similar socio-economic context as private schools did equally well. And after accounting for student background characteristics, school autonomy and school competition for students, New Zealand's reading difference was 0. And so when I looked into this in 2019, across the Auckland region, 68.2% of all female school leavers and 56.4% of all male school leavers finished with NCEA level 3 or above. And at King's, 94% of female students had level 3 in 2016 and 87% of males. At Dio, 97% had level 3. Recently, Dr. Michael Johnson from public policy think tank The New Zealand Initiative told RNZ, if you can find a really good public school, then it's probably just as good as a private school. But he said he thought that the public system was probably more variable. You do tend to have smaller class sizes in private schools and higher university entrance rates, but you also might be thinking about taking them out of their normal friend circles. Maybe, as Serena says, there's commuting time involved. And of course, uni isn't the be-all and end-all. We all know someone who's done really well out of, an apprenticeship or something else. So it's a lot to weigh up and a lot for parents to worry about. And often research shows us that it's actually the support at home that makes all the difference. So if you think the private school is going to be much better, then maybe it's worth trying. But if there are other great options in the state system for you, you could also set your child up for success by investing that money in other things for them.
Now, a question from Kim in Kororareka, Russell. If I get a second job, am I going to have to pay more tax on the money I earn from it? And does that make it not worth doing?
This is actually a question that I get asked pretty often, and I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about how the secondary tax system works. I talked to one of my favourite tax nerd friends about this, Robyn Walker at Deloitte.
Yeah, so when you do have a second job, you need to select what is the most appropriate tax code for that second job. And so what you should be looking at is what is your total expected income that you're going to earn from all sources, and use that to figure out what your marginal tax rate is. So if you had one job that you were earning $40,000, say, and then you had a second job where you earned another $40,000, that would mean that your total earnings were $80,000. And when you look up what's the marginal tax rate that applies to $80,000 of income, you should end up with a tax code which is equivalent to the 33% personal tax rate. And so your second job would be taxed at that flat the flat rate applying to your marginal tax rate. Now, in that example, it's probably not the best example. The person is likely to be overtaxed in that scenario because of that second job. A bunch of that income should be taxed at either the 17.5% or the 30% tax rates on average when they do their tax returns. And so that person should expect to get a tax refund in that circumstance. What they might want to do if the jobs are broken into sort of two kind of equal chunks is look at whether or not they could apply to the IRD for a tailored tax code for that second job to get something that gets the tax more accurate to what the total tax should be for the year.
Okay. But is it fair to say that you shouldn't, it doesn't matter whether your income comes from two employers or one, you'd pay the same amount of tax overall?
Overall, you will pay the same amount of tax. Now, when you're employed obviously tax is being withheld at source under the PAYE rules, and this is generally designed to ensure that tax is being taken at what should be approximately the right rate throughout the year, and that hopefully you end up in or around about the right position over the entire tax year, and to the extent that there is any difference, unders or overs, that would be processed and identified through the tax return process or IRD's auto-calc process. And so, yeah, it is just a temporary thing. At the end of the year, should all be squared up.
So you should end up paying the same on your second income that you would if you were earning the extra dollars from your main job. The system's just designed to help you avoid getting a big bill at the end of the year.
Now, we have a question from someone who's worried about passing on a chunk of change to her kids. She says, when I remarried, I kept my home and rented it to help pay off the mortgage. I have made a loss for the past few years as the house required quite a few serious repairs due to its age, and my son has been renting it for the past couple of years. I'm retiring this year and have little superannuation. My question is, when I sell it at the end of next year, how can I give my children $150,000 each without them being hit with a tax or some sort?
So the good news here is that there is no tax for either the parent or the child in this scenario. There's no gift duty in New Zealand anymore. But what it could affect is the rest home subsidy, which we've talked about a few times. If you're applying for that, you have to have assets below a set threshold, and stuff you've given away as gifts can be included in that. The assessment doesn't include gifts up to $8,000 a year in the 5 years before you apply, or $27,000 from longer than 5 years ago. So if that's something that you are worried about, you might want to get some legal advice on that.
Now, one from Gary. He wants to know, why are banks and government agencies so fussy with all their paperwork and documents when you're just basically applying or renewing an application for something, when years ago you didn't need loads of paper, documenting your life story?
Yeah, I think anyone who's applied for basically anything from a bank lately can relate to this question. The answer is basically that it's just the anti-money laundering laws that the banks have to work under now. They have to be able to prove where money is coming from and really identify customers in a way that they didn't before. They also have additional rules around making sure that people can afford their loans, but I'm told that is much less of a driver of the paperwork mountains that we now climb than that AML stuff. So blame the AML.
And this one in from Georgia. She's wondering if it is risky to invest a lot of your money with one provider, even if it's diversified across funds. She says, for example, I have my KiwiSaver with Simplicity, and I also hold an investment fund with them. I'm thinking of moving more money across to Simplicity, but putting it into different investment. But I'm wondering if I should be diversifying my provider as well as diversifying my investment fund.
Yeah, diversification is great. We should get that out there just to start us off. But I'm told that generally there's not a huge amount of benefit for the average investor in diversifying across different providers. Greg Bunkall, who's data director at Morningstar, says there isn't much point for someone like, just an everyday person. He says the funds you're investing in are already well diversified across businesses, sectors, different parts of the world, and different asset classes. He says in Simplicity's case, their high growth fund has more than 1,000 individual investments already, so that's strong diversification. But he says in all cases, investors should seek independent financial advice and have an expert plan out how their investments are aligned to their goals and objectives. If what you're worrying about, which I think might be the case, is the possibility of a fund manager failing, Anne Marie Lockyer from Pi Funds said the regulatory framework that KiwiSaver managers and other fund managers are working under means that the risk of failure is really low. Even if a provider failed, your money is being held by an independent custodian. She says using a single provider can also offer benefits such as consistent investment philosophy, coherent portfolio construction, as well as simpler oversight of your long-term strategy. She says where an investor is comfortable with a provider's approach, fees, transparency and performance track record, there's no inherent need to diversify across multiple providers. So it's super important to be diversified in your investments, but you can generally have one manager who's doing that diversification.
That was a very helpful question, Georgia. Thank you very much. Well, it's been a bit of a mix this episode, but let's talk home loans now, something we've done a few times before. Susan, you wrote a story earlier in the week about Donald Trump's 50-year home loan idea. What's this all about?
Yes, he suggested it as a possible answer to housing affordability, because if you spread your home loan over a longer period, you have lower repayments. Ed McKnight, a property economist at Opes Partners, calculated that for every $100,000 of home loan a borrower has, the payment on a loan at 5% interest would be $19 lower per week with a 50-year term than it would be with a 30-year one.
It's not all good news, though, is it?
No, it's very much not. It's much more expensive to have a home loan hang around that much longer. You'd pay a significant amount more interest, and the median age of a first home buyer now is about 36. So you wouldn't want to be carrying a home loan into your 80s, I would have thought.
No, just a student loan. We did get some feedback from last week's episode from people who were sceptical about the bank's rationale for not offering 30-year home loan fixes, which they say, and which we are, because we talked about it before, common in the US. 30, 50, 30.
Yeah, so someone pointed out that his parents took out a 30-year fixed mortgage with the State Advances Corporation when the population of New Zealand was less than 2 million. So he said the idea that our market isn't big enough now is not correct. This is interesting because it has come up in the past. I actually answered a couple of questions about this in the middle of last year in my written column. And the answer basically is that it was a different financial system back then. The government was involved in a way it really isn't in New Zealand now. In the US, as we said, the government-sponsored entities like Freddie Mac make those long-term loans possible. So it's not that it's not possible in New Zealand. It's just that our system is different now. The banks are handling it. The government isn't so involved. And the market just doesn't have the depth to let the banks do their hedging.
Right, getting near the end, and that brings us to our audience question.
Last week we asked when New Zealand's population has actually dropped.
And the answer is at the end of the 19th century, when New Zealand went through what they called the Long Depression, and in 1888, about 10,000 more people left than arrived.
So now our question for this week is, what has been the food item with the largest price increase so far this year? Send your answers as well as any other money questions you have to questions@rnz.co.nz.
It's got to be butter. Got to be butter.
Could be, or could be cheese.
No Stupid Questions with Susan Edmunds was written and presented by Susan Edmunds. Justin Gregory is the producer. The engineer is Phil Bench. Thanks to Serena, Kim, Gary and Georgia for the questions, and Dr. Michael Johnson, Robyn Walker, that's me, Greg Bunkall and Anne Marie Lockyer for their answers. Follow and listen to No Stupid Questions with Susan Edmunds on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or any podcast app so you don't miss an episode.
Bye for now.